Jokes aside, I guess today is my 9/11 because Mark Zuckerberg is supposed to be doing an interview later. I'm sure you've heard about that, and we all know how this is going to turn out. A bunch of journalists, whether they come from, big business channels like Fox News and CNN, whether they come from independent journalists online or everything like that, are going to just whitewash his testicles and worship the ground he walks on. No one's going to ask him the hard questions. No one is going to condemn him for his privacy violations and his human rights violations, nor the fact that he's a multi-billionaire and what the fuck does he do with that money. No one's going to ask what sort of connections he has with what sorts of businesses that require Facebook as this huge avenue for labeling everybody and everyone. So, what's the point of this? What's the point of having Mark Zuckerberg get on TV and make an ass out of himself talking about the new features that are going to be on Facebook and all the new apps and shit? That's more of the same. Does he really need to talk about that? You'll find out if you have Facebook or not. So, in reality, this is like when the Queen appears or something like that. It's just there to get people having a boner and to get everyone all riled up and have something to talk about. It might attract tourists. It might attract, some economic stimulation because, Mark Zuckerberg, he is modern royalty. He may as well have a fucking crown on his head and walk down a lane with a carpet and everything, wear drapes and shit like he's a fucking king. Because more or less he is. More or less he's a modern monarch in today's society. And that's why he gets away with fucking murder. And, nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about how the internet and by extension capitalism has reverted us back to feudalism. About how these monarchs have complete control and they get to do whatever they want and their underlings get to abuse their power and their privilege, and either your only choice is to either go without or deal with the abuse. That even the fucking trolls like Mark Anthony tell me that. Oh, dude, they can make your own website. Well, what about my fucking abuse? I'm entitled to some kind of reparations for that, don't you think? But what about all the rape and the bullshit I had to go through? What an age we live in where apparently it's a privilege to get treated like shit. I pay for internet to go online and get banned everywhere and treated like fucking garbage. Oh, that's a privilege now. That's a privilege where the nicest thing I've heard all day was somebody private message me asking me what my deal with gay people was. That was it. They just said, what's your deal with gay people? It was neither nice nor mean, and that's that's the high end of my day. That's the highlight. That someone didn't completely ridicule me, that someone didn't slanderize me or, threaten to flag my videos or something, just that they had an authentic question and seemed a little offended, but in a humane way. In a dignified way, in a dignified response, just confronting me man to man. That's the best I can hope for. What does that say about the internet? Would me making a website somehow magically make that better? No. Would me somehow having more money and more influence make that better? No. The fact is, this is a societal problem. The fact is, while you all are waving your little American flags, and remembering 9/11, the fact is you never had any rights to begin with. What the fuck are you crying about? So some people died. Were they ever really alive? Would you call it living that they had to go to work every day and live a monotonous existence of bills and debt and bullshit and expectations? If you ask me, they're better off dead. And I don't mean that as in they deserve to die. I mean that as in that's a mercy killing. The fact is, what would have happened if they had continued to live to this day? They would still be busting their ass, they would still have a purposeless existence, and eventually they would die anyway. But not before a good 50-some years of hard work and contributing to the masterful elite that don't give a shit about them, and then turn around and don't even provide them health care or social security or any other benefits. They're just told to sink or swim, even though they've contributed all this effort, even though it is because of them that people get to have these nice things. You know, it's like Obama said, you didn't build that. Mark Zuckerberg didn't build Facebook. It was the people that signed up for Facebook that built Facebook. The fact is, if it wasn't for people signing up for Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg would still be a failed Harvard student, just hacking some girls' web pages. I want to look at their nude photos or some shit like that. If it wasn't for the people signing up for Facebook, we'd still be using MySpace. So, you know, why do we do this? Why do we give so much precedence toward one man who did absolutely nothing besides collect his pay and, you know, put in a bunch of little goons to moderate Facebook and to treat people like shit and discriminate while they continue to make more money off of them? Oh, you like that money, don't you? But to respect the human beings on the Facebook, to respect the human beings enough to let them post what they want to post and be free to do as they please, oh, that's going too far. Apparently it's asking for too much to just respect somebody else's civil liberties. But a good billion or 200 billion even dollars? Oh, you're entitled to that. Mark Zuckerberg's entitled to all the fucking money in the world. But I'm not entitled to my freedom of speech. No, if I want my freedom of speech, I'm going to have to work for it. I'm going to have to forge my own website and put my name up in lights and hope to God that that plans out just to have my freedom of fucking speech. But Mark Zuckerberg gets another 100 million as I make this video. So, what does that say about society? Why should I feel bad about some people dying, regardless of where or when or how, when this is what you defend? When this is the ideology of your entire superorganism. It's not simply the country. It's not simply the Western Hemisphere. It's the world. I mean, it's especially in the States, but it's a world problem. It's a world mentality. And you know, as much as people bitch about the government, I would rather the government control our lives. Because if the government were in absolute control and it wasn't, the power was not distributed amongst corporations, then the fact is we would all have better lives. We'd still be cattle. There's no doubt about that. But we'd be well-fed cattle. We'd be cattle in the free range and be able to hump the other cattle to our heart's desire. And we'd roam around and moo at the top of our lungs. And we'd be happy cattle. As opposed to, these pimply-faced young corporate tycoons that cage us up and abuse us and kick us. And, bash our head ins with a hammer like the farmers do to the Rio cattle. That's the difference. We would still be slaves, but we would be a better class of slaves. We'd have a higher standard of living as slaves. And that's something, So what does it say about you that you can't even comprehend that? You can't even comprehend the fact that if you're going to be a slave, you should have some nice things while you're a slave. You should, be comfortable in your enslavement. If you're going to have to go to work every day and do your everyday routine, then you're entitled to some health care. You're entitled to getting laid. You're entitled to getting drunk and acting stupid. You're entitled to saying ignorant, racist shit. You're entitled to being a complete jackass. Because the only reason why anybody has these things, the only reason why anybody has any power, is because you bother to get up in the morning and do whatever bullshit you gotta do. So, maybe you should think about that, instead of giving memory to the people that died on 9/11. And if you ever see Mark Zuckerberg, punch him in the dick for me, please. So, that's all I have to say.